"Are you useless, old woman? Are you mad?" That was the first thing that burst out of Darren's mouth, the moment a splash of water hit his chest. It wasn't much, just a few drops from a soaked rag, but it landed on the front of his expensive black designer shirt like acid. The scent of detergent and floor polish mixed with his cologne, and his face twisted. Mara, the elderly janitor, hadn't seen him coming. Her eyes had been focused downward as she crouched to scrub a stubborn patch of grime from the far corner of the Apex Meridian Tower's marble lobby. Her grip on the rag had weakened with age, and when she flung it toward the bucket, a few droplets flew out, one of them choosing Darren as its final destination. The lobby was mostly quiet until Darren arrived in his usual fashion: loud perfume, louder attitude. His polished shoes clicked against the marble as heads turned. He froze when the water touched him. "Do you know how much this shirt costs?" he barked, stepping forward. Mara barely had time to lift her head. Before she could say anything, his leg swung forward without warning, and the tip of his expensive shoe struck her directly in the stomach. There was no time to flinch or dodge. Her frail frame crumpled sideways, slamming into the hard floor. The bucket overturned, the rag flew, and a dull, bone-deep thud echoed across the lobby as her hip hit tile. Gasps filled the room. The receptionist stood. One security guard took half a step forward, then stopped. Everyone knew Darren Owolabi, the arrogant, spoiled son of Chairman Franklin Owolabi, a name no employee dared to say without caution. Mara groaned faintly but didn't cry. She didn't scream. She lay in pain for a moment, then placed her palms on the wet floor and tried to lift herself. Her hands slipped. She tried again. Above her, Darren sneered. "Jesus, are you blind? Deaf, both? You splashed dirt on me and you're still breathing. What's wrong with your senses?" From behind him, laughter bubbled. Darren's two friends, Miles and Remy, stood smirking in their suits, both with coffee in hand. Darren pointed at Mara as if she were a stain. "People like you are the reason this country's still crawling. Look at you, wrinkled like my grandma, still dragging a mop like a dying insect." Mara finally sat up, breathing heavily, one hand on her waist. Her voice came out slow and strained but calm. "I'm sorry, my son. It was a mistake. I didn't see you." "Keep quiet," Darren snapped, cutting her off mid-sentence. "You didn't see me. You didn't see my shoe. You didn't hear the sound of greatness approaching. Are you stupid, blind, and cursed?" The receptionist's mouth opened, but no words came out. She sat back down. The elevator dinged. No one entered. Darren's voice filled the entire room now. "Do you even have a family? Or have you spent your whole life mopping floors in buildings you can't afford to walk into? Is that it? Is this your legacy? Pathetic." Mara winced as she touched her soaked wrapper, her ribs aching. Still, her voice remained gentle, unshaken. "Pride goeth before a fall, my son." Darren leaned closer, scoffing. "People like me don't fall. My father owns this company. You—" He paused, grinning. "You are nothing." He spat on the ground next to her. "If I wasn't merciful, I'd make one phone call and have you sacked today." His voice echoed again, louder now, desperate to dominate. "The next time I see you near me, I'll show you not all mad people live in Yaba." Mara's hands trembled as she reached for her rag. Her mouth moved, but her voice had lowered. "You kicked me today," she whispered, "but one day you will kneel before me." For the first time, Darren's smirk faded. He leaned forward slightly. "What did you say?" Mara stood slowly, every movement a struggle. Her back remained bent. Her clothes were soaked on one side. But her eyes, those eyes, didn't look broken. They looked old, steady, eternal. "You said this building belongs to your father," she said softly. "But I tell you now, the true owner is watching, and one day the truth will come out." Darren scoffed, waving her off like a joke. "Mad woman talk. Let's go, Jory," he said, adjusting his glasses and brushing imaginary dust from his shirt. The trio entered the elevator laughing, the door closing behind them. Mara stood alone in the lobby, her breathing slowed. She glanced down, at the mop, the overturned bucket, the dirty rag, the tiles that had once been hers. Around her, employees averted their gaze. No one helped her. No one dared. And then she whispered, just loud enough for no one to hear. He kicked me in the very company built with my name, my sweat, and my ideas. She turned and began to walk away. Each step echoed in the cold, gleaming lobby. No one knew, no one guessed, but the old woman with trembling fingers and torn pride was the true owner of Apex Meridian Tower. And soon, Darren Owolabi would learn that lesson the hard way. Darren Owolabi was born under chandeliers. From the moment he opened his eyes in a luxury hospital suite in Ikoyi, the world bowed before him. His first crib was handcrafted in Milan. His baby formula was imported. His diapers were changed by hired nannies who tiptoed like servants attending a crowned prince. He was the only child of Chairman Franklin Owolabi, a name that echoed through the skyscrapers of Lagos like gospel. His mother, Cecilia Owolabi, came from old money, quiet, dignified, and vast. She had suffered through 3 miscarriages before Darren arrived, so when he finally did, she wrapped his life in silk and shielded him from every no the world could offer. He never fetched water, never carried his school bag. If Darren cried, someone was punished. If he failed a test, the teacher was blamed. If he hit another child, his mother would storm the school gates shouting, "My Darren doesn't misbehave. He's a leader." Leadership for Darren meant entitlement. By the time he was 10, he had a personal driver. At 15, he crashed his first car and blamed the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper was fired. In university, he bullied classmates, bribed lecturers, skipped exams, and still graduated with honors. His father said only one thing at the ceremony, clapping slowly as Darren received his certificate: "That's my boy." Back at home, Franklin Owolabi sat at the top floor of the Apex Meridian Tower, a polished titan in a city of brass. He didn't own the building, technically, but he ran it like a kingdom. He was the managing director. His signature controlled contracts. His words shaped careers. His silence terrified entire departments. No one questioned Franklin, except one person: Cecilia. She had been there from the beginning, back when Franklin had nothing but big dreams and unpaid rent. They met at the University of Ibadan. He was charismatic, driven, a boy with steel eyes and a voice that could sell water to the ocean. She had money, elegance, and vision. They married young, built together. But as the towers rose, something else rose too: Darren, and they raised him wrong. After graduation, Franklin didn't hesitate. He handed Darren a polished title, an office with a view, and a team of staff who couldn't say no. "Let him learn from the top," Franklin had said. "Let him build character," Cecilia added. But Darren didn't build anything. He walked through Apex Tower like a windstorm of ego. He was 25, dressed in designer suits he didn't pay for, carrying files he never opened, bossing around people old enough to be his uncles. He was rude, impatient, and blind to anything that didn't shine. He insulted drivers, threw coffee at interns, tossed files across conference tables. He would show up late to board meetings, prop his feet on the desk, and scroll through his phone while executives presented Millionaire proposals. And he loved it. He loved the fear in their eyes. The way staff went silent when he walked by. The doors that opened before he even reached them. Apex Meridian Tower wasn't just a company to him, it was his birthright. He once told a fellow executive, half laughing, "Even if I burn this whole building down, my father will buy another one." The executive smiled tightly and nodded, because everyone knew the truth. As long as Darren's last name was Owolabi, the rules didn't apply. That's why when the cleaner, an old woman with shaky hands and a wet rag, accidentally splashed him with water in the lobby, Darren reacted exactly how he was raised to react, with outrage, with cruelty, with no regard for consequences. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that Mara was not just a cleaner. She was the ghost in the marble. She had built this place before the world started calling it Franklin's empire. Now, after 10 years of silence, a kick had shattered the mask she wore. And somewhere above the lobby on the 18th floor, the lioness had begun to stir. Meanwhile, Darren didn't care. He stormed into his office, still fuming from the incident, flinging his leather briefcase onto the glass table. "She had the audacity to touch me," he growled. pacing in circles while Miles leaned against the doorframe, sipping his iced coffee. "Bro, the video is trending already," Miles said without much concern. Darren turned sharply. "What video?" "Some intern caught it on her phone, you kicking that cleaner." He shrugged. "People are already quoting her line about you kneeling one day. It's got like 4,000 shares. Darren narrowed his eyes. "Let them post. I'll sue every single one of them." Remy chuckled from the couch. "You know what's funny, though? That woman didn't even flinch. She looked like she's seen things." Darren shot him a glance. "She's just an old broom. Mopping floors in a building her ghost probably can't afford to haunt." He didn't know how close he was to the truth. Downstairs, Mara sat quietly in the janitor's closet, breathing deeply. Her side ached. Her knees throbbed, but her hands had stopped shaking. She took out a small envelope from a hidden compartment inside the wooden locker. The paper was brown, faded, and thick with time. Inside were documents, original documents, shareholding agreements, board signatures. The real bones of Apex Meridian Tower. She hadn't looked at them in 10 years. Now she held them again. Outside, no one suspected anything. Just another cleaner taking her break. But inside that closet, something ancient was waking up. And by tomorrow morning, the tower would tremble. The janitor's closet had always smelled like old soap and forgotten time. It was barely wide enough for a mop bucket and a stool, but Mara had claimed a corner for herself over the years. A small wooden locker held a pair of worn sandals, a rosary with missing beads, and a yellowed photo of a building still under construction. Apex Meridian Tower, 10 years ago, before the glass skin and gold logo. She'd kept her head down for a decade, walked like she wasn't there, learned how to vanish between the hours and echoes. She became part of the background, like the plants in the corner of the lobby or the buzzing light above the elevator. No one ever really looked at her. Not the staff, not the visitors, not even the security guards who saluted children in suits but barely nodded at her. Mara had become invisible, and that was exactly what she wanted. Her decision to disappear from the boardroom 10 years ago hadn't come from fear. It came from strategy. She needed to watch something or someone, and she knew that power watched from shadows more effectively than it ruled from stages. So she shrank, traded her tailored jackets for faded blouses, swapped her car for silent shoes. She mopped the floors of her own company and listened to the building breathe. She saw the rot setting in early, the false loyalty, the blind obedience, the way Franklin's shoulders grew straighter the more people bowed, the way Darren began to mimic that posture even as a teenager, but she waited, and when Darren kicked her in the lobby, she knew the wait was over. Still sore from the incident, Mara made her way to the women's restroom on the mezzanine level. She washed the blood from her fingers with cold water, wincing at the bruise rising across her ribs. Her reflection in the mirror looked back at her, not broken, just tired. As she adjusted her headscarf, she heard two women speaking in low voices outside. "Did you see what happened?" one asked. "Of course I did," the other replied. "But I'm not saying a word. That's Chairman Owolabi's son. You want to get fired?" "Still, she's just a cleaner." What was he so angry about? Their voices faded as they walked away. Mara leaned against the sink and smiled faintly. "Just a cleaner," she whispered to herself. "Yes, that's what they all think." She left the restroom, returned to the janitor's closet, and picked up the brown envelope again. 10 years ago, Mara had made the mistake of trusting Franklin. He had been ambitious, yes, but also grateful once. Back when they built the foundation of Apex Meridian together, he used to call her the lion behind the curtain. They started as co-founders, equal partners. But Franklin had always wanted more control, more spotlight, and eventually he convinced her to step back. He said she deserved to rest, that the company needed a louder face. She believed him, and for 10 years she watched him turn Apex Meridian into a theater for his ego. The board meetings turned performative. The real decisions were made behind doors with golf friends and cousins. Darren was given an office at 23. Cecilia hosted luncheons with socialites who called Mara the office manager without blinking. She should have spoken up sooner. but her silence had purpose. Until now. Mara carefully packed the documents into a leather briefcase she hadn't touched in a decade. She changed into a slightly cleaner blouse, adjusted her head wrap, and took one final look at the locker. Her eyes lingered on the old photograph. The building was barely bones then, beams, scaffolding, and ambition. She placed the photo in her pocket and stepped into the hallway. She didn't take the service stairs this time. She walked to the main elevator, the golden one reserved for executives, and pressed the button. A young man in a tight-fitting shirt stood nearby, scrolling through his phone. He glanced up, looked her over once, then looked away. When the elevator arrived, he started to step in, but she raised one hand slowly. "This one's mine," Mara said. The man blinked, confused, but something in her tone made him step back. As the doors closed, she stood straight and faced her reflection. Not as a cleaner, not as a forgotten name, but as the woman who built everything behind her. The numbers on the panel climbed, 3, 4, 5, up to 18. The executive floor. When the elevator dinged open, 2 security officers standing by the entrance frowned. It took them a second to recognize her. After all, they saw her every day. Just never here. One of them, a tall man with a radio clipped to his belt, cleared his throat awkwardly. You're not allowed." Mara didn't stop walking. She passed between them like she'd never been away. "Tell the board I want to speak with them," she said calmly. "Tell them the sleeping lion has woken." The 2 guards exchanged wide-eyed glances. Inside the glass-walled conference room, the board was mid-discussion. The table stretched wide, covered in tablets, bottled water, and folders with 5-year projections. At the head sat Darren Owolabi, delivering his favorite speech. Another upcoming contract, another global partnership, another way to elevate Apex to a world-class platform for African excellence. When the door opened, a junior assistant stepped in. "Sir, someone is asking to speak with the board." Franklin raised an eyebrow without turning. "Who?" The assistant hesitated. "Mara, the cleaner." Confused murmurs rose across the table. Franklin finally turned. "Who?" The name triggered something in the oldest board member, Mr. Bako, who sat quietly near the end. "Wait," Bako said slowly. "You mean Mara Durojaye?" Silence fell. The name landed like thunder. Every eye turned to the door. Franklin's throat tightened. "That Mara," he whispered. The assistant nodded. "Yes, sir, she's outside, but she's the cleaner." One of the women on the board covered her mouth. "You mean she's been here all along?" Before anyone could say more, the doors opened. Mara entered, not with a mop, not with bowed shoulders, but with the posture of someone who had carried marble beams and vision on her back. She didn't need a suit to command attention. Her walk did the talking. Her faded wrapper whispered power. She walked straight to the head of the table. Franklin stood halfway, unsure whether to welcome or intercept her. She looked him directly in the eyes and said, "Get up from my chair." For a long moment, no one moved. Darren Owolabi stood frozen beside his leather chair, halfway between denial and disbelief. The boardroom was silent, the kind of silence that made even air feel heavy. Only the hum of the central air conditioner dared to speak. Mara stood at the head of the table, eyes steady on Franklin's. Her voice had been calm, not loud, but it carried weight. "Get up from my chair," she had said. Franklin's hands twitched slightly, as if reaching for an invisible explanation. Then, with a forced laugh, he stepped back. "Mara," he said slowly, you've been working here as a cleaner." "Yes," she replied. Another board member, Mrs. Ease, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "But why would you—" Mara raised her hand gently, and the question died in the woman's throat. "Because I was watching," she said. No one interrupted her. "For 10 years, I watched this company lose its soul. I watched it become louder, greedier, and more hollow. I gave this building my mind, my name, my foundation, and then I gave it to people I thought I could trust." Her eyes turned back to Franklin. "You told me to rest. You said you'd protect what we built. And instead, You turned it into a mirror for your ego. Franklin's face hardened. You walked away, he said, his voice rising slightly. You disappeared. I stepped back, Mara corrected. I never surrendered. There's a difference. She reached into her bag and pulled out the brown leather folder. With deliberate motion, she placed it in the center of the table. The room seemed to lean toward it. Inside were the original founding documents of Apex Meridian Tower, stock ownership agreements, corporate registrations, signatures. Mara tapped the folder once with her fingers. I still own 62% of this company, she said. I never signed over my controlling rights. All I did was delegate day-to-day operations while I took care of personal matters. Bako, the eldest member of the board, picked up the folder and flipped through the pages. His lips moved silently as he scanned the lines, his eyes widening. She's telling the truth, he said finally. It's all here. The shares, the clauses, the timestamps. She never relinquished ownership. We never voted on a full transfer of control. A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. Franklin stepped forward, his voice trembling beneath forced authority. Mara, please, let's talk about this privately. Sit down, she said again, her voice quiet but unshakable. This time, he obeyed. And for the first time in 10 years, Franklin Owolabi sat at a board meeting as a guest in the company he thought he ruled. Mara looked around the room. From this moment forward, she began, I am reactivating my full rights as the majority shareholder and founder of Apex Meridian Tower. All executive decisions will now pass through me. She paused briefly, then continued. Effective immediately, Mr. Franklin Owolabi is hereby removed from his position as managing director. Gasps broke across the room. One of the younger board members, a man in a navy blazer, stood halfway. Madam, this is a serious step. We'll need legal review. The legal foundation is in that folder, Mara said, not looking at him. This board allowed itself to become a playground. You permitted nepotism, mismanagement, and ethical decay, but no more. The lion was sleeping. Now it's awake. Franklin sank deeper into his seat, his voice barely a whisper. Mara, don't do this. I have a family. I've given everything to this company. And I had a name, she replied, eyes never leaving him. You turned it into a mop. I trusted you with something sacred, and your son kicked me like trash on the floor of my own building. Tell me, Franklin, how much more do you think I should tolerate? The boardroom was silent again, but this silence felt heavier, different. It was the silence of consequences arriving at the door. Mara turned to the assistant, who had remained awkwardly standing near the entrance. Prepare an internal memo, she instructed. Apex Meridian Tower is undergoing restructuring. All communications will now go through me. Send it company-wide before close of business. The assistant nodded quickly and exited. Mara placed both hands on the back of the chair she had reclaimed. She didn't sit yet. She looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. To those of you who let this happen, she said, I will give you time to make your choices. Loyalty, integrity, truth. These are the new pillars of this company. If you cannot uphold them, you are free to step away. But if you stay, know this, your silence is no longer acceptable. Not in my building. With that, she finally sat. The atmosphere changed instantly, not with applause, not with chaos, with clarity. It was like the floor had shifted back to its original position. Franklin Owolabi remained still in his chair. His hands rested on the table, but his eyes stared at nothing. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. Mara didn't gloat. She didn't smile. Power didn't need decoration. She reached for the glass of water in front of her, took a sip, and calmly placed it down. Meeting adjourned, she said, and the boardroom emptied. As she sat alone in the quiet, she looked out through the glass walls at the city skyline beyond. The same skyline she once dreamed about with Franklin, back when it was just blueprints and ambition. But dreams change. And now, the empire was hers again. Not in theory, not in whispers, but fully, absolutely, undeniably. The news broke by lunchtime, An internal memo was leaked before the official statement could be drafted. By early afternoon, social media caught fire. On Twitter, the phrase, "he kicked his destiny," was trending at number 3. On Instagram, a viral caption read, "From apex to ashes, the fall of Darren Owolabi." The press didn't hesitate. Articles flooded every digital outlet, all with variations of the same impossible headline. Cleaner revealed as true owner of Apex Meridian Tower. Founder returns, demotes MD after public assault. Janitor billionaire shocks corporate Lagos. But nothing spread faster than the video. The moment Darren kicked Mara in the lobby had been captured perfectly. Low quality, shaky hands, but the audio was clear. His voice thundered as he screamed, "Are you blind, deaf and foolish at the same time?" Followed by the sharp sound of a kick and the dull, horrifying thud of her body hitting the floor. The internet devoured it. Clips were edited into memes, reaction videos, duets. Influencers reenacted the scene. Comment sections filled with outrage, disbelief, and brutal mockery. One comment read, "This is what happens when your father gives you a company instead of a conscience." And in the middle of the storm, Darren disappeared. He didn't go into hiding immediately. At first, he laughed it off. At home that evening, slouched on the living room couch with a can of energy drink and his phone in hand, Darren showed the trending hashtag to his father and scoffed. "People are just bored," he said. Franklin didn't answer. He stood near the window, staring at the street below with his arms folded. "They'll forget by tomorrow," Darren added. "They won't," Franklin replied quietly. Darren sat up. "Come on, it's social media, it's just noise. You'll issue a statement, maybe fire her for attacking me." Franklin turned slowly, his voice calm but final. "She owns the company." Darren blinked. "What?" "She never gave up her majority shares. Never signed full control over to the board. Legally, it's hers. Every floor, every chair, every decision. She just took it back." Darren frowned, confused. "But you're the chairman." "I was," Franklin said. Darren leaned forward. "She can't just walk in and take it back, can she?" "She did," Franklin said, "and no one stopped her, because she built it." Silence filled the room. Darren opened his mouth, but Franklin raised his hand. "Don't say anything," he said. "Not now." He walked past his son, his steps slow and heavy. His voice trailed behind him, soft but burning. "You destroyed me with one foolish kick." 3 days later, the world Darren knew evaporated. The company removed Franklin's name from the website. His photos were taken down from the executive hall. Security stopped saluting. His official email account was deactivated. By the end of the week, things got worse. Investigations began. Audit reports were unsealed. Shady contracts from the past decade resurfaced. Procurement records showed inflated figures. Government agents arrived at the house in Banana Island, requesting documents and passwords. Franklin's personal accounts were frozen. His Range Rover was repossessed. His Dubai property was flagged for review. He tried to make phone calls, former allies, old friends, but one by one, they declined his calls or said they were in a meeting. In the court of public opinion, he had already lost. People who once fought for seats at his dinner table now deleted photos with him online. Cecilia, once the queen of social clubs, received side-eyes in the supermarket and had 3 charity invitations revoked. And Darren, he vanished from social media. His once glamorous Instagram page, filled with captions like "Built Different" and "Hustle by Bloodline," became a ghost town. No new posts, no stories, no brand deals. Even the girls who used to call him King D stopped picking his calls. The day everything truly sank in was quiet. Darren returned to the office late in the evening, long after most people had gone home. He pushed open the door to his father's old corner office, his sanctuary of leather, glass, and gold trim, and paused. It was empty. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. The scent of cologne and air conditioning had been replaced with the dry, dusty smell of something forgotten. In the center of the room sat a single plastic chair. Franklin sat in it, hands folded, eyes vacant, staring at a wall that no longer bore his legacy. Darren stood at the doorway, unsure of what to say. "Dad," he whispered, "I didn't know she owned the company." Franklin didn't move. Darren stepped closer. "I swear I didn't know. I thought she was just—" "Don't say it," Franklin said, his voice low. Darren froze. "You don't need to say anything," Franklin continued. "You're not sorry, you're just hungry." The words pierced deeper than Darren expected. He lowered his gaze. Franklin finally turned to face his son, and for the first time in his life, Darren saw something in his father's eyes that wasn't strength, it wasn't pride, it wasn't power, it was defeat. "Do you know what it took to build my name?" Franklin asked. "Do you know how many bridges I crossed and burned to make people bow when I walked in?" Darren said nothing. "And you," Franklin continued, "with one act of pride, one stupid moment, you threw everything into fire." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "You didn't just embarrass me, you ended me." Darren opened his mouth, but no words came. Franklin leaned back in the plastic chair. "From today," he said, "you're on your own." The silence that followed was thicker than the air in the room. Darren walked out with nothing but his phone, one pair of jeans, and the echo of his father's final words ringing in his head. It would be the last time they ever spoke. At first, Darren thought it was just a phase, a bad week, a storm he could ride out. He told himself it would pass. He still had friends, connections. All he needed was a few days in the background and things would reset. His father's accounts would be unfrozen. His name would still mean something. But by the second week, he began to understand. No one was coming. He made his first call to Bio, the guy who used to drive him from club to club, and once tattooed his name on his forearm. "Bro," Darren said casually, "you think I can crash at your place just for a couple of nights? Long story." Bio hesitated. Then his voice came through, uncomfortable. My guy, I would owe, but my babe from Port Harcourt just landed. She's using the second room. No space." Darren smiled, trying to sound unaffected. "No wahala, no wahala." The next day, he tried Femi, the one who used to borrow Darren's clothes and wear them like a second skin. "Guy, make I just hold small 10K. "I never chop since yesterday," Darren said, half laughing. Femi read the message, left it on blue tick, then blocked him. That night, Darren sat on the curb near a bus stop in Aja, clutching his phone like it owed him an explanation. The battery was low. His stomach growled. His sneakers, once limited edition, were dusty, scuffed. A fly buzzed near his ear, and he didn't bother swatting it away. His last 2,000 naira was gone. Spent on transport, a sachet of water and a meat pie that tasted like rubber. No one called, no one texted. The girls who used to call him Zaddy had vanished from his DM like vapor. The silence was louder than his shame. By the third week, Darren was sleeping on the floor of a closed-up shop, belonging to a distant cousin who had reluctantly agreed to let him stay for a short time only. There was no mattress, just cardboard boxes flattened on concrete. His pillow was a folded hoodie that still smelled faintly of cologne and ego. Every morning he woke up before dawn, washed his face with sachet water, sat on the curb and stared at the city that used to belong to him. And one morning, when the hunger turned sharp and the shame turned quiet, he walked toward a construction site. He had passed it many times before. Men with calloused hands carrying bags of cement, boys with tired eyes pushing wheelbarrows, sand mixing with sweat under a burning sun. He stopped near the entrance and waited. His heart was thudding. A foreman in a faded yellow helmet walked past, barking instructions. Darren stepped forward. "Sir," he called out. "A beg, I fit work." The man turned and looked him over from top to bottom, his face twisted into a smirk. "You dey craze," the man said. "You may be like billboard model one carry cement." Darren nodded once. "I no get choice, sir." The foreman shrugged. "Okay. Come tomorrow 6 a.m. If you late, forget am." Darren bowed his head. "Thank you." And that was how it began. Every morning he arrived just before sunrise. His palms weren't ready. The first week they tore open, blisters that split, bled, and hardened into something unfamiliar. He carried bags of cement until his shoulders screamed, mixed concrete until his back locked, pushed wheelbarrows until his legs trembled. Sometimes he vomited behind the mixing pit. Other times he cried in silence when no one was looking. The boys mocked him. "See rich boy life," one shouted as Darren dropped a bucket. "From Ben to bricklayer." Another laughed, shaking his head. "Omo hunger humble lion-o." But Darren didn't talk back. He was too tired to be proud. At night, he sat alone on the floor of the empty shop, hands bruised, shirt soaked, stomach hollow. He didn't dream. He didn't pray. He just survived. Then came the rain, a heavy one, the kind that floods the gutters and turns construction sites into swamps. Work was cancelled. No wages for that day. Darren sat near the site wall, soaked, arms wrapped around himself, watching mud swirl like it had somewhere better to go. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and that's when the next phase of his fall began, not on a construction site, but in the silence that follows true hunger. A boy named Lucky, barely 19 and already built like a labourer, leaned beside him and lit a cigarette. "You still dey try," Lucky said. Darren didn't respond. Lucky glanced sideways. "You want make small extra, real fast cash. 1 run." Darren finally looked at him. "What kind of run?" Lucky smiled with yellow teeth. "The kind way go make you forget say you never chop." Darren didn't say yes, not that day, but hunger is louder than caution, and silence can bend even the strongest spine. By the end of the week, Darren said yes. Darren didn't sleep the night before. He lay on the shop floor staring at the cracked ceiling, his stomach growling louder than the wind. Rainwater leaked through a hole in the roof, tapping slowly onto the concrete. The room smelled of dust, damp wood, and despair. The decision had already been made, but that didn't stop his heart from pounding. It wasn't a grand plan, just a simple job, according to Lucky. 1 house, Lucky had said earlier that day. "We enter, grab what we can, and leave. Nobody gets hurt. Quick, clean, no noise." Darren had nodded, but even then, part of him had screamed to walk away. That voice, thin, tired, reminded him he was once a man who ordered lobster at brunch and argued about Wi-Fi speeds. That man was gone. The new Darren would do what it took to eat. By midnight, they were crouched in an alley behind a large walled compound in Lekki Phase 1. The kind of house with smooth gates, trimmed hedges, and glass windows that reflected your poverty back at you. Lucky wore all black. He had gloves, a flashlight, a small knife tucked in his belt. Darren wore a borrowed hoodie with holes in the sleeves and shoes that made too much noise when he moved. "You ready?" Lucky asked without looking. Darren swallowed hard. "Yeah," he said, though his body disagreed. They scaled the fence using an old plank propped against the back wall. The night was humid. Mosquitoes danced around their ears. The garden was quiet. Motion sensor lights flickered but didn't come on. Lucky seemed to know exactly where to step. A side door gave way to a slim corridor that led into the kitchen. Darren's pulse throbbed in his neck as he stepped inside. It smelled like lavender and money, marble countertops, silver appliances, clean floors. He moved like a shadow, following Lucky's silent instructions. They passed the dining room, then the hallway, then finally into what looked like a study. Bookshelves, a desk, and drawers. "Start with the drawers," Lucky whispered. Darren's hands shook as he pulled the top drawer open. Files, nothing valuable. The second drawer held watches, a tablet, a wallet. He grabbed what he could. Lucky was at the desk, pocketing a stack of foreign currency, when suddenly footsteps echoed down the hall. They froze. A door creaked. Lucky whispered, "Go." Darren turned, heart racing, and bolted toward the exit, but took the wrong hallway. The house twisted like a maze. He stumbled into a large living room and froze. A painting hung above the fireplace. His breath caught in his chest. It was her, Mara, painted in oil, seated in a traditional wrap, her eyes looking slightly upward like she was listening to something divine. He stepped backward, bumping into a glass table. The sound echoed. A light came on. Someone gasped. "What are you doing here?" It was a woman's voice, firm, not frightened, not angry, just steady. Darren turned slowly. Mara stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing a robe. Her hair was wrapped in a scarf. Her eyes landed on him, and she didn't blink. He dropped the tablet. His mouth opened, but no words came out. She stepped forward. "Answer me," she said calmly. "What are you doing here?" He fell to his knees before he knew he was falling. He was trembling. "I didn't know this was your house," he said, his voice cracking. "I swear I didn't know." Mara stared at him for a long time. His hands were shaking. His face was soaked with sweat. His voice broke again as he whispered, "I didn't come to hurt anyone." "And yet," Mara said, "you came to steal." Darren nodded, still on his knees. "I was hungry. I've been carrying cement, sleeping on concrete. I had no one else." She stood silently. Her presence filled the room without effort. Darren's head dropped. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Mara didn't answer right away. She walked past him and picked up the fallen tablet. She placed it gently back on the shelf. Then she turned to face him. "You kicked me," she said softly. His body tensed. "You spat on me. You told me I didn't belong." "I was stupid," Darren said. "I thought I was untouchable." Mara studied his face. "You were raised to think that. But now you've learned." He looked up slowly. "I've lost everything," he said. "My father, my name, my pride. I don't even know who I am anymore." For a moment the room felt like a confession booth. Mara didn't speak for a long time. Finally she said, "Do you still think people like me are beneath you?" "No," Darren replied, voice firm despite the tears in his throat. "You were always above me. I just didn't have the eyes to see it." She nodded once. Then, to his surprise, she extended a hand. He stared at it for several seconds, unsure if it was real. "Get up," she said. He hesitated. "Get up, Darren." He took her hand. Her grip was strong, steady. She pulled him to his feet. He stood awkwardly, ashamed, eyes to the floor. But she didn't let go of his hand. She said, "You kneel now for forgiveness. The question is, are you ready to rise for redemption?" He nodded. "Yes." She stepped back. "You will not return to crime. You will not carry cement unless that's your honest calling. You will not blame anyone else." "No father, no mother, no ghost of your past," Darren swallowed. "What do I do now?" "You learn," she said. "You listen. And you start again." He wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie. "Will you help me?" he asked. Mara looked at him with eyes as old as the building they once shared. "I will not carry you," she replied, "but I will show you where the road begins." And with that, Darren Owolabi took his first step back, not toward wealth or reputation, but toward something new. Something earned. The lobby of Apex Meridian Tower had never been quieter. The marble still shone like glass, polished by years of hands that went unnoticed. The chandeliers above cast soft golden light, and the silence below seemed to carry its own weight. People were beginning to gather now, staff members, executives, even interns, drawn by the whispers. Something unusual was happening. At the center of it stood Darren Owolabi, no longer in suits, no longer flanked by his entourage. His hoodie was clean but faded, and his trousers plain. He stood alone, unmoving in front of the spot where months ago he had raised his leg and kicked a woman he thought beneath him. He lowered himself to one knee, not for a show, not for forgiveness, but because he had promised himself he would return to the place he had fallen and kneel on the exact tile his pride had broken. Behind him, the security guards who once opened doors for him now watched in silence. Some didn't recognize him at first. Some did, and stared harder. The receptionist who had stood frozen that day walked slowly from her desk, arms crossed. She didn't say a word. Darren stayed where he was, eyes fixed on the floor, heart beating slow and heavy. He didn't know if she would come, but she did. Mara stepped through the entrance, dressed simply in a navy blouse and grey skirt. No heels, no jewelry, just presence. The crowd parted for her without being asked. She walked toward him without rushing, without drama, and stopped just in front of him. He didn't look up. "I said one day you would kneel before me," she said quietly. "I remember," Darren answered, his voice steady. "Do you know why I said it?" He nodded once. "Because I needed to learn." Mara studied him for a long time. "Pride," she said, "is a heavy crown for a child to wear. It blinds the eyes and hardens the heart. But pain—" She paused. "Pain softens both." "I know that now," Darren said. She stepped closer. "Look around you." He did. Slowly, the faces watching, some curious, some uncertain, many waiting for judgment. Mara asked, "What do you see?" "I see people who remember what I did," Darren replied. "And what else?" He took a moment. "I see people wondering if I've changed," she said. "And have you?" "I'm trying," he answered. Mara nodded. "That is enough, for now." She gestured toward the floor beneath him. "This place," she said, "this tile, it's not just marble. It's memory. You spilled your arrogance here. Let your humility clean it." Darren closed his eyes. He said, "I'm sorry." Mara replied, "I accept." Then she extended her hand once again, as she had in the living room weeks ago. "Stand, Darren." He did, slowly, without drama, without applause. The crowd began to disperse. Work awaited, and people didn't yet know how to process what they'd seen. But they would remember. In the weeks that followed, Darren became a quiet figure in the tower. He no longer rode the executive elevator. He took the stairs. He joined a new department, facilities and logistics, not because he was told to, but because he asked to learn from the bottom. He cleaned storerooms, carried boxes, filed documents. He stopped trying to be noticed, and because of that, people began to notice. One afternoon, while reviewing inventory sheets in the basement, Darren heard a familiar voice behind him. "Learning to count boxes now?" asked Franklin Owolabi. Darren turned. His father looked smaller somehow. The sharpness was gone from his jawline, his shoulders less square. He wore a simple shirt and no watch. Darren nodded. "Yeah, it helps me stay grounded." Franklin didn't laugh. "I heard what you did," he said. "The kneeling?" Darren asked. "No," Franklin replied. "The walking." Darren looked confused. Franklin explained, "Anyone can kneel for a moment. But walking in humility? That's harder." Darren didn't know what to say. His father exhaled deeply and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I lost everything," he said, "because I taught you nothing." Darren replied, "You gave me everything. That was the problem." For the first time in their lives, both men were silent for the same reason. They finally understood each other. Later that month, Mara called a staff-wide meeting. No suits required, no hierarchy. She stood on a small stage in the same lobby where everything had changed. She addressed them with calm authority. "This building," she said, "was built on two things, vision and people. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of both. From today forward, Apex Meridian will remember who it belongs to, not just in ownership but in spirit." She paused, letting the silence breathe. "I will not pretend the past didn't happen, but we will not live under its shadow. We will learn. And we will walk forward." Then she turned slightly. "Darren." He stepped forward. People held their breath. Mara said, "He is not being rewarded. He is being rebuilt." Then she looked at him directly and asked, "Are you ready?" Darren answered, "Yes, ma'am." "Then let's begin again," she said. In the weeks that followed, Apex Meridian changed, not just in policy, but in energy. Mara implemented mentorship programs, introduced anonymous feedback, opened a fund for low-level staff education. And every month, without fail, Darren was the first to arrive and the last to leave. The last time he entered the executive elevator, it wasn't to gloat, it was to clean it. Someone once asked him, while he mopped the brass buttons with care, "Do you miss who you used to be?" He didn't even pause. "No," Darren replied. "That version of me was loud because he was empty." The man nodded and walked away, and Darren kept wiping. Down in the lobby, the marble tile where it all began still shone. But now when people walked across it, they didn't step over it in ignorance. They remembered, not just the fall but the rise,